One day, in a small coastal town in England, a strange event occurred. The young man Bobby was playing golf with the town Dr. Thomas when he suddenly heard a terrified scream. The two followed the sound and arrived at a dangerous cliff. They discovered a bloody man lying at the bottom of the cliff. Dr. Thomas was old and had a prosthetic leg, making his movement extremely inconvenient. Therefore, Bobby had to climb down to the bottom of the cliff alone to investigate. By the time he reached the man, the other party was gasping for air, with only his last breath remaining. Bobby hurriedly called up to Dr. Thomas standing on the cliff, telling him to quickly go and call the rescue team. After Dr. Thomas left, the injured man suddenly grabbed Bobby by the wrist, like a final surge of energy before death. He uttered an extremely strange sentence. "Why did not they ask Evans?" After that, this person breathed his last breath. At first, Bobby did not think much about it. He only assumed this was a normal accident of slipping and falling down the cliff. But no one could have expected that the severity of the incident went far beyond imagination. This was not only a meticulously calculated murder, but the killer later mapped out an even more thrilling locked-room murder situation. What on earth was all this about? Per the request of movie enthusiasts, in Today Analysis, I would like to bring everyone a miniseries with a very refreshing detective vibe. The series is adapted from the novel by the queen of detective fiction, Agatha. The male lead Bobby used to be a lieutenant in the British Royal Navy. After his discharge, he returned to his hometown, making a living day by day through all sorts of temporary part-time jobs. Bobby was extremely familiar with this town. Therefore, from the very first glance, he could be certain that the person who died from falling off the cliff was not a local resident. Driven by the instinct of a soldier, Bobby searched the other party pockets, hoping to further confirm this person's identity. In the victim pockets, there was a red fountain pen, a key attached to a whale-shaped ornament, a pocket watch, and a photograph of a woman. Other than that, there were absolutely no personal identification documents. Bobby glanced at the pocket watch and noticed the time was approaching 3 in the afternoon. Because he had a job at 3 o'clock, Bobby was extremely torn, not knowing whether he should leave first or not. Right at this moment, a strange man appeared on the cliff. After discovering someone had fallen off the cliff, the other party also immediately went down to the bottom to check. This man introduced himself as Roger, saying that he was just passing by chance. Bobby then asked Roger to stay there to keep an eye on the body and the belongings at the scene. He also clarified that Dr. Thomas had gone to call the rescue team, the police would arrive shortly, and he himself had to leave early due to prior engagements. Roger very readily accepted Bobby's request. After saying goodbye to Roger, Bobby hurried to the town church. His father was the pastor there, and Bobby usually worked part-time playing the organ at the church to accompany the ceremonies taking place there. During today's ceremony, Bobby accidentally ran into his childhood friend Frankie. Frankie's father was an earl with an extremely noble status. Over the years, Frankie had always lived with her father in London, very rarely returning to the town. Because of this, her appearance made Bobby feel incredibly surprised and happy. The following day, Frankie suddenly came to see Bobby, proactively asking about the cliff falling incident from the day before. It turned out that Frankie had always been extremely passionate about deductive detective novels. Therefore, after reading the news about the fatal accident of a strange man in the newspaper, she could not wait any longer and immediately ran to find Bobby, one of the witnesses present at the scene, to gather gossip. Bobby then told Frankie all about the strange dying words the man had said before his death. Why did not they ask Evans? Immediately, Frankie's imagination flew far away. She firmly asserted that this was absolutely not a normal accident of slipping and falling down the cliff, but definitely a murder. She believed that within the dead man dying words, there might very well be hidden information related to the killer. However, Bobby did not agree with Frankie's speculation at all. He only considered it an unexpected accident. A few days later, Bobby, as a highly important witness, participated in the hearing for this accident. The police confirmed the victim identity as Alan. Alan was originally a gentle and friendly person who had no enemies. His biggest daily hobby was hiking. Alan's sister and brother-in-law also testified that prior to the incident, Alan had walked alone to this town for a trip. Therefore, the judge ultimately ruled that the victim had accidentally slipped and fallen off the cliff to his death. However, Bobby discovered a problem. He met Alan, sister, and brother-in-law at the hearing. According to the judge, the woman in the photograph found in the victim pocket was Alan's sister. But Bobby clearly remembered that the woman in that photograph had a young and beautiful appearance, with an extremely elegant and refined aura. Yet the sister named Amelia, standing before him, was a middle-aged woman with very heavy makeup. These two fundamentally could not be the same person. What made Bobby feel even more uneasy was that during the hearing, a mysterious man wearing a hat also appeared, carrying a sorrowful expression and constantly staring at him. And on the very evening of the second day after the hearing, Bobby encountered misfortune. While doing his part-time job at the town amusement park, he drank a bottle of beer. As a result, right after the beer went down his stomach, he immediately fainted and collapsed to the ground. Fortunately, at that time, Frankie and a few friends were also hanging out at this amusement park. They noticed the situation was wrong, so they immediately took Bobby to the hospital for emergency treatment. Dr. Thomas, who was responsible for treating Bobby, conducted tests and discovered a large amount of the drug morphine inside his body. Luckily, due to timely emergency care, Bobby managed to keep his life. Waiting until Bobby woke up, Dr. Thomas advised him to be more open-minded. He also said in a profound tone that people sometimes inevitably have moments of confusion. Not long ago, the newspaper published a news piece about an elderly wealthy man named John. Suspecting he had cancer and fearing he would suffer a lot later in life, he drank poison to commit suicide. However, in the end, the forensic doctor autopsy results showed that John's body was extremely healthy. He could have lived for at least another 10 or 20 years. It turned out that Dr. Thomas suspected Bobby took drugs to commit suicide, so he spoke up to advise him. Bobby hurriedly explained that he had no intention of taking his life lightly. At this point, Dr. Thomas breathed a sigh of relief, but immediately, his nerves tensed up again. If it was not suicide, then someone definitely deliberately targeted Bobby to murder him. Frankie, who was standing nearby, after hearing these deductions, immediately went alone to the amusement park to investigate. The amusement park owner told Frankie that on the evening the incident occurred, the people inside the amusement park were basically all residents living in the town. There was only one man wearing a hat and a mask who looked a bit suspicious. Right when Frankie's side had no further progress, Bobby, who was recuperating at the hospital, made a monumental discovery while reading the newspaper. It turned out that the newspaper published details related to the cliff falling case and also released the photograph found in the victim pocket. The woman in the photograph was indeed the younger version of Amelia. However, Bobby was absolutely certain that the photograph he saw in Allen's pocket was absolutely not the photograph the newspaper was currently publishing. This also meant that someone had taken action to switch the photograph, and the only person who had the opportunity to do this seemed to be the strange man named Roger, who replaced Bobby to guard the scene at that time. Thinking of this, Bobby hurriedly left the hospital to find Frankie. The two shared the information they each held. Bobby speculated that the man wearing a hat at the amusement park was very likely the mysterious man wearing a hat who constantly stared at him at the hearing. But why would the other party want to kill him? Could this really be related to the cliff falling case? Perhaps, if they found that man named Roger, all the questions could be answered. Just as Bobby and Frankie were discussing what to do next, bad news suddenly arrived. Dr. Thomas, who was still very healthy yesterday, was now discovered to have hanged himself in his own home. Based on the traces at the scene, the police made a preliminary judgment that Dr. Thomas died by suicide. Bobby naturally did not agree with this conclusion at all. From what he knew, Dr. Thomas was originally an open-minded and friendly person. He did not have any suicidal tendencies. How could he suddenly think foolishly and seek death? To clarify the whole truth, Bobby and Frankie formed a two-person detective team, beginning to investigate the hidden corners of the cliff falling case. Frankie quickly utilized her father's extensive social network to investigate Roger's identity and residential address. Roger was temporarily unemployed. Currently, he was living with his older brother family in a luxurious manor located in the suburbs of London. In order to get close to Roger, Frankie staged a fake car accident right outside the manor. Eventually, she smoothly infiltrated the home of Roger's brother. The person who came out to receive Frankie was Roger's sister-in-law named Sylvia. That very afternoon, Frankie met Sylvia's husband, who was also Roger's brother named Henry, along with the couple's son named Tommy. However, the target figure, Roger, never appeared. To prevent the scenario where Frankie might encounter danger inside the manor, Bobby found a nearby motel to rent a room. Unexpectedly, he gained a very surprising harvest. The room keys at this motel all had a whale-shaped ornament attached, and the victim, Alan, who fell off the cliff, also had a similar key on him. Bobby later went to check the motel guest registry and, sure enough, found Alan's name. Not only that, Bobby also accidentally caught sight of two familiar faces right inside the motel. It was none other than victim Alan's sister and brother-in-law. At this moment, the two of them were talking and laughing happily, completely unlike the state of someone who had just lost a loved one. To clarify what exactly was going on, Bobby quietly trailed behind Amelia and her husband, discovering that they entered an extremely mysterious mental sanctuary. Bobby had no way to further verify the identities of these two people, so he had to temporarily let it go. That evening, Bobby prepared to take advantage of the dark to break into Henry Manor to tell Frankie about his discoveries. As a result, outside the manor, he accidentally bumped into a woman. The other party was unexpectedly the beautiful woman who appeared in victim Alan's photograph. The woman looked extremely terrified, as if she was hiding from someone. Seeing this, Bobby stepped forward, stated his name and residential address, and said that if she needed it, he could offer help. Right at this moment, a car was driving toward them from not far away. The woman was frightened and fled in a panic. Bobby looked closely and discovered the person sitting in the car was Roger. To avoid alerting the enemy, Bobby had to temporarily leave first. The following morning, the woman in the photograph proactively came to the motel where Bobby was staying. She introduced herself as Moira, an ordinary housewife. According to what Moira recounted, her husband named Jasper was the director of the mysterious mental sanctuary located nearby. Jasper was a psychological pervert with an extremely strong desire for control. He frequently administered electroshock therapy to patients and also regularly abused and tortured Moira. Because of this, Moira hoped Bobby could help her so she could escape the devil claws. Moira's weakness and helplessness aroused Bobby's protective desires. But what Bobby cared about more at this moment was the relationship between Moira and the victim Alan. Yet Moira said that she absolutely did not know anyone named Alan, nor did she know why the other party had her photograph in his hands. While the two were talking, someone came to the motel, looking for Bobby. Bobby retrieved a car key from the newcomer. It turned out he had made a prior arrangement with Frankie to disguise herself as her private driver and infiltrate the manor to rendezvous with her. Waiting until Bobby got the key and prepared to talk in more detail with Moira, Moira had already quietly left the motel. At the same time, Frankie, who was currently inside the manor, finally met Roger. Roger was a humorous and witty person, extremely well-spoken, and did not reveal any abnormal signs. However, Roger's older brother named Henry had extremely bizarre actions and gestures, often losing his temper for no reason. Frankie heard from Sylvia that Henry's mental state was indeed abnormal, and he also had a bad habit of injecting the drug morphine for a long time. Sylvia planned to go with Roger to the nearby mental sanctuary to invite their old acquaintance director Jasper over to the house to diagnose Henry's condition more thoroughly. The next morning, Sylvia and Roger set off for the mental sanctuary. Bobby, masquerading as Frankie's private driver, took this opportunity to drive to the manor. Bobby and Frankie quickly compiled the clues each of them held. Before they could analyze them meticulously, Sylvia and Roger returned, bringing along director Jasper of the sanctuary and Jasper's wife Moira. This happened to be exactly lunchtime, so they all gathered together to eat. Sylvia very enthusiastically introduced Frankie to Jasper and his wife so they could get acquainted. Unexpectedly, Jasper suddenly made things difficult. He directly questioned Frankie about why she had to fake a traffic accident to sneak into this manor and what her ultimate purpose was. Because looking at Frankie's mental state, she absolutely did not resemble someone who had recently experienced a car accident. Frankie was questioned to the point of being somewhat dumbfounded and not knowing how to reply. Right at this moment, Henry, carrying the status of the household head, suddenly stood up and left the dining table. A meal was thus dissolved in a less than joyful atmosphere due to this reason. After the meal, Frankie saw Jasper standing in the living room, dropping soft and gentle words to comfort Sylvia. The actions and gestures of the two of them looked a bit sketchy. Meanwhile, Jasper's wife Moira was standing blankly alone in the yard, carrying a heavy-hearted appearance. At this point, Bobby quietly stepped forward to comfort her. Faced with Bobby's sincere concern, Moira finally opened her heart. She frankly admitted that she had lied earlier. According to Moira, she indeed knew the man who died from falling off the cliff, named Alan. The other party, just like Bobby right now, tried to reach out and help Moira, wanting to help her escape Jasper Claus. Unexpectedly, he had to suffer an unclear and unjustified death. Moira suspected that her own husband, Jasper, had murdered Alan. The reason she had to lie before was out of worry that it would implicate Bobby. But now that things had come to this point, Moira was pushed to a dead end. Because her husband, Jasper, had now fallen in love with Sylvia. To be able to stay by the other party's side forever, Jasper had recently developed murderous intentions toward both Henry and Moira herself. Therefore, she was now extremely desperate, hoping to receive Bobby help. These words made Bobby feel incredibly moved. He comforted the other party not to be afraid, while guaranteeing that he would definitely rescue her as soon as possible. Moira smiled in response to show her gratitude. After that, she left the manor together with her husband Jasper. After Jasper and his wife left, Roger found a chance to meet Frankie privately, leading her to a desolate forest. Noticing there was no one around in all directions, Roger directly questioned Frankie why she had to intentionally infiltrate the manor, and what her scheme ultimately was. Seeing that she could no longer hide it, Frankie had to honestly confess that she was investigating the cliff falling case. She also asked Roger in return why he wanted to switch the photograph on the victim. Roger hurriedly spoke up to explain that he did not switch the photograph, but merely hid it, because he had long secretly fallen deeply in love with Moira. If the photograph was published by the press, it would not only damage Moira's reputation. After all, she was a married woman. Furthermore, once Jasper found out about this, he would definitely torture Moira even worse than before. In order not to let the person he loved suffer any harm, Roger had to brave the risk of breaking the law and hid Moira's photograph away. With her intuition, Frankie felt Roger was not lying, so she did not continue to make things difficult for him. Afterwards, the two of them calmly and peacefully returned to the manor. Meanwhile, the fake driver Bobby, because he still had not eaten lunch, sneaked into the manor kitchen to ask the cook for some food. The cook at this time was sitting with Tommy, the son of Henry and Sylvia, to watch the boy do his homework. Bobby noticed the red fountain pen Tommy was using looked exactly identical to the fountain pen left on victim Alan's body. The cook told Bobby that this fountain pen was a gift given to Tommy by an elderly wealthy man named John. Mr. John had visited the manor last year. Bobby immediately recalled that the late Dr. Thomas had mentioned the story of the wealthy Mr. John committing suicide by drinking poison due to mistakenly believing he had cancer. Bobby had also seen this news published in the newspaper. Could victim Alan have known Mr. John too? Just as Bobby was falling into extreme confusion, a gunshot interrupted his train of thought. The people who heard the gunshot also included Sylvia, Roger, and Frankie, who were sitting and drinking tea out in the flower garden. They followed the sound to the outside of the study room door. Roger appeared worried, continuously banging on the room door and twisting the doorknob. He discovered the room door had been locked from the inside by someone, and there was no human response from inside the room. The group had to walk around to the outside of the room to prepare to crawl in through the window. Right at this moment, Jasper, who had just left not long ago, returned and also followed everyone to the outside of the window. However, the window was also firmly locked. The group had to smash the glass pane to crawl through the window inside. As a result, they discovered Henry had been shot and killed. Jasper found the study room key right inside Henry's pocket. The police very quickly received the report and rushed to the scene. Because this was a murder occurring in a locked room without any loopholes, combined with the fact that Henry indeed suffered from mental illnesses, the police quickly concluded that Henry died by suicide. However, both Bobby and Frankie felt something was bizarre. They went to the restaurant of the motel where Bobby was staying, proceeding to compile the clues each had just investigated. Both of them deduced that Jasper was the one who killed Henry. That locked room merely looked flawless, but in reality could entirely be faked. After entering the room, Jasper found the study room key from victim Henry's pocket, but only the devil knew if the key was actually in Henry's pocket at that time. Jasper could completely hold the key ready in his hand, and then slip his hand into the victim's pocket, pretending he had just discovered the key. While finishing the discussion about the case and preparing to leave the restaurant, Bobby accidentally saw a very familiar-looking group photograph placed on a shelf. After careful inspection, Bobby confirmed the two people captured in that photograph were the wealthy Mr. John and the cliff-falling victim Alan. According to what the motel owner recounted, the two men in the photograph were originally best friends, and also esteemed guests of this motel. Before the incident happened, Alan had rented a room here. After Alan passed away, the motel owner even sent his luggage back to his residence in London. It seemed the wealthy Mr. John and victim Alan indeed knew each other. No wonder Alan also had a red fountain pen of the same style as little Tommy pen on him. Perhaps both were gifts brought by Mr. John. Following that, Frankie, through her extremely powerful Earl father, found Alan luggage. In the luggage, there were many letters Mr. John had written and sent to Alan. The wealthy Mr. John continuously mentioned a woman named Nana in the letters. In Mr. John's descriptions, Nana was a pure and flawless woman who viewed money as dirt. Mr. John considered her the true love of his life. To be able to take such highly private emotions to write a letter and tell Alan proved the relationship between Mr. John and Alan was indeed not ordinary. Frankie then arranged to meet Mr. John's lawyer, wanting to investigate one step further whether the deaths of Mr. John and Alan were ultimately related to each other or not. Through the lawyer mouth, Frankie learned that the wealthy Mr. John, one day before drinking poison to commit suicide, had suddenly altered his will, leaving his entire inheritance to Nana, whom he had only known for a mere 2 months. The lawyer at that very moment felt suspicious about the authenticity of this will. However, because Mr. John had no offspring, no one stepped forward to raise questions. Only Mr. John's old friend Alan had many complaints about this matter. Relying on the clues provided by the lawyer, Bobby and Frankie prepared to find the witnesses of Mr. John's will to converse. There were 3 witnesses for the will in total. They were respectively the cook, the gardener, and the maid who had taken care of Mr. John for many years. Bobby and Frankie went to find the cook first. According to what the cook said, both she and the gardener did not see Mr. John alter the will with their own eyes. Mr. John, new girlfriend named Nana, only held the will and told her and the gardener to sign it. The cook still felt indignant and angry because of this matter. She complained that she, the gardener, and the maid had served Mr. John for many years, but ultimately did not receive a single penny of inheritance. From the cook mouth, Bobby and Frankie also received extremely shocking information. That was the maid of Mr. John's house, was the person named Evans. Bobby suddenly awakened to the realization. No wonder before his death Alan uttered the sentence, "Why did not they ask Evans?" It turned out, among the 3 witnesses of the will, the cook and the gardener very rarely got to meet Mr. John directly. Only the maid Evans, who stayed close to take care of Mr. John from morning till night, was the person who understood all the inside stories best. Bobby and Frankie quickly tracked down Evans' residential address. By complete coincidence, this person named Evans was the new maid hired to work at Bobby's house. It turned out after walking a huge circle, the truth was actually right beside him. Only now did Bobby clearly understand Evans' identity. That was because after Mr. John passed away, Evans got married and took her husband's last name, after which she went to this town to work for hire. This also explained the reason why Alan appeared in this town. He actually came here to find Evans to verify matters related to Mr. John's will. Bobby and Frankie hurriedly drove back to town. But before they could go find Evans, the 2 of them bumped into Moira in town. The 3 then went to a coffee shop to sit and talk for a while. Moira told the 2 that Henry was now dead, and she also feared she would encounter an accident, so she temporarily fled to this town. In the middle of the 3 conversing, Moira's complexion suddenly turned terrible, her eyes looking frantically out the window. Bobby and Frankie also panicked and looked outside following her gaze, but saw absolutely nothing. When turning their heads back, Moira appeared somewhat embarrassed. She spoke up to defend herself that just now she was only dizzy, mistakenly thinking her husband Jasper was tailing her. Bobby breathed a sigh of relief, picked up the coffee cup, and prepared to drink it all in one gulp. Frankie immediately stopped him and poured the coffee sitting in front of the 2 into a small vial to preserve it. It turned out that just a moment ago, Frankie caught a glimpse of Moira taking the opportunity to drop something into their coffee. Frankie thereby suspected that Moira wanted to poison and kill her and Bobby. Now, they only needed to take the coffee for a little test to confirm her own speculations. Seeing her trick exposed, Moira finally no longer pretended to be a gentle lady. She immediately changed her expression, aggressively spewing vulgar insults. As a result, she exchanged it for a resounding slap from Frankie. Do not forget that our Frankie was the daughter of an earl. How could she endure insults from someone else? Only Bobby stood nearby with a dumbfounded expression, not knowing what to do. Frankie then reminded him to quickly return home to find Evans. Waiting until Bobby hurried back home, he accidentally caught the scene of Roger beating the maid Evans. Fortunately, Bobby returned in time to be able to prevent another murder from happening. The police very quickly received the report and rushed to the scene, arresting both Roger and Moira to bring them to justice. Based on Roger's confession, the serial murder case involving 4 lives was finally brought to light. As it turned out, the seemingly weak and harmless Moira was the true mastermind standing behind the curtain. First, Moira used the fake name Nana to win the favor of the elderly wealthy man Mr. John. She not only deceived the other party feelings, but also spread rumors that Mr. John had cancer in order to trick him into committing suicide. Mr. John, who was in a state of blind infatuation like a burning wooden house, completely believed it to be true and ultimately lost his own life. Next, Moira ordered Roger to destroy Mr. John's will. Because Roger had long ago fallen at Moira's feet, willingly acting as an accomplice for her. Later on, Mr. John, old friend Alan, grew suspicious of the will. He investigated throughout a long journey to find the maid Evans. Thus, Moira hired a professional assassin, pushing Alan off the cliff to fall to his death. During the hearing, Bobby saw a man wearing a hat with a gloomy expression that was this professional assassin. Dr. Thomas' death, along with Bobby being poisoned at the amusement park, were all caused by that professional assassin. Moira, feeling a guilty conscience, feared Bobby and Dr. Thomas, who were the first to discover Alan's body, might have grasped some clue. Because of this, she ordered the professional assassin to kill them, to silence them. The reason Roger appeared so perfectly at the scene of Alan's accident, the main purpose was to retrieve Moira's photograph to help her clear the suspicion. As for the people claiming to be Alan's sister and brother-in-law at the hearing, they were also hired by Moira to play the part. The goal was for this cliff-falling case to be quickly closed. On the other hand, the death of Roger's older brother Henry was also not due to suicide. The killer was none other than Roger himself. Roger always bred jealousy towards his older brother, inheriting the entire family wealth. Therefore, he personally planned and orchestrated the locked room murder case. On that day, after Roger and Frankie returned from the desolate forest, he found an opportunity to shoot dead his older brother who was inside the study room. To cover up the gunshot when killing him, throughout that period, Roger frequently intentionally used firecrackers to scare away the sparrows inside the manor. The gunshot used to kill Henry was ultimately perfectly concealed by the sound of the firecrackers. Next, Roger hid a pistol inside the fireplace of Henry's study room, while also designing an automatic mechanism to fire at a set time. By the time the gunshot rang out, Roger himself was drinking tea with Frankie and Sylvia out in the flower garden. From that, he had a perfectly flawless alibi for himself. The door to Henry's study naturally could not be locked from the inside either. It was just that after hearing the gunshot, Roger was the first person to charge to the front, and deliberately pretended he could not open the room door, thereby forging a locked room. As for Moira's current husband, meaning Director Jasper of the mental sanctuary, from beginning to end he was only a background character, an unimportant passerby. The fact that Jasper and Sylvia had an affair was entirely deliberately fabricated and rumored by Moira to direct suspicion onto them. The pitiful Jasper and Sylvia, throughout the entirety of these events, were merely 2 implicated innocent people. Up until this moment, the case was considered completely clarified. This work is one of the classic masterpieces in the novel collection of the female writer Agatha. The case involves an extremely massive number of characters and clues. Moreover, the director and screenwriter of this latest miniseries version arbitrarily added many subplots, making the entire case exceptionally complicated. We had to spend 2 to 3 days just to complete the script writing process. The recording process for this series also cost us at least 3 hours to finalize. We wonder if we have clearly explained this whole story yet. Alright then, today's episode ends here, and this is just our objective review and analysis of the episode. To support the film crew and fully enjoy every moment, please go to the theaters or watch on official platforms. Thank you for watching and see you in the next movie review and analysis. Bye-bye.